The Monty and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
Number 10 is the Dangerous Alliance, kicking off at number 10, a faction often overlooked but highly influential. The Dangerous Alliance, led by the notorious Paulie Dangerously, a.k.a. Paul Heyman. This group was the early 90s WCW, was stacked with talent like Ricky Rude, Stunning Steve Austin, Arn Anderson, and Bobby Eaton. Thoughts? Where does the Dangerous Alliance sit with you, Jimmy Farrow?
Well, if it's the 10 greatest factions of all time, they don't sit in my top 10.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, really. I'll start with that. First of all, let's go back to how we felt about them when we were watching them at the time. That's what I felt. And I think to quote you were like, who's this idiot with the walkie-talkie?
That's true.
Okay? Now, let's look at it a little further. Did this faction catapult any of them into superstardom or something even bigger? Because no, they did not. No, this faction was just there. Even though on paper it looks lovely, it almost sounds like the Jets roster every year before the games are played. So I'm going to say no. While it was wonderful to have this collection of people together, no, this was not one of the 10 greatest. Nope. That's how I feel about that. Would you like to know who I might throw in there instead?
Well, I will tell you, if anybody is wondering, the Heenan family is not on the list.
Right.
Because I will tell you this about the Heenan family. Wait a minute, but hold on. They were not a faction. It was a family. They did not all wrestle together at the same time.
Right.
Perfect wasn't there with Bundy and Andre. It wasn't like that.
Yeah, but all other factions do split up and have individual matches, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't see the difference.
I stuck to the list of true factions.
Okay. Well, I feel like just because it said family behind the Heenan, it didn't mean that it wasn't a faction. That was definitely a faction of sorts. That would be on my list, but there is another one. Do you want me to wait till later? I mean, there's a couple of them that
what if they're on this list?
That's true too. All right, so keep going.
All right, so number 9. The Hart Foundation is Canada's greatest export. The Hart Foundation, originally the tag team of Bret Hart and Jim Hart, Neid Hart. This faction evolved into a full-blown stable in the mid-90s when Bret brought his family members like Owen, the British Bulldog, and Brian Pillman into the foundation. The foundation, Keeley feuded with Stone Cold Steve Austin, embroidering the anti-American sentiment, being adored in Canada and hated into the U.S. Jimmy, the Hart Foundation.
Here's another one where I'm not necessarily putting them in my top 10. Reason. I'll tell you why.
All right, I'm listening.
When I think of the Hart Foundation, I think of Bret and Jim. I don't think of anyone else. It's what the faction is memorable as too. It has to be that their input on the industry, their timing, yada yada yada. Yes, their anti-U.S. rhetoric was fine, but I'd seen that before on much more effective levels coming out of the mouths of Sergeant Slaughter and the Iron Sheik. Okay, so to me, I've seen this before. All right, it's cool. It was nice to see Bret Hart being a prick. I think he was great at that. He was great at basically anything he did. But again, when I look at this faction, which has a foundation for a last name, I don't say to myself, wow, those guys really all catapulted after that.
Wait a minute, I'm gonna take some anger with you. Listen, dude, there's no team that says faction at the end of it.
No, I
it's not.
That.
You know what I mean? So come on.
I understand that. No, I understand that. But
that was a passive-aggressive Jimmy Farrow move there.
Well, I'm mad about the Heenan family. So obviously,
how could you be mad about the Heenan family? They did not wrestle at the same time together.
Than the names we're bringing up here. That's why.
But they did not wrestle together at the same time.
That don't matter to me. They were definitely a collection.
Well, that's like saying the greatest factions: Greg Valentine, Ken Patera, and Don Morocco. I mean, the Grand Wizards faction. Come on, man. You know I'm right on this. If Stud Andre Stud Andre, Rude, and Perfect all wrestled at the same time.
Right.
I would get it. I would understand it, but it wasn't.
They never tagged up with each other in matches. Sure, they did.
Stud and Bundy did, yes.
Right.
Rick Rude
and Andre and Haku were tag team champions, weren't they?
Yeah, but they weren't all wrestling together at the same time. It wasn't a faction.
I don't see it that way. I see them as a faction, but that's me. We could disagree about it. That's fine.
That's fair. That's why we're doing this.
Dude,
I did this one for you.
Yeah.
It pained me to really do it, but I did it for you anyway.
Right.
Number 8 is the list dominated by NXT's recent years, the Undisputed Era, led by Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, Bobby Fish, and Roderick Strong. Created the faction that totally took over NXT for countless of years.
Right.
Thoughts on
That's a tough one. Era? That's a tough one.
I know you're a fan of theirs, though.
I am, but I have to keep things, historically in perspective. NXT is not what it was. As great as they were during their time in NXT, they're definitely clearly the best faction ever in NXT, but NXT has not, let me put it this way. It's also the imprint you leave behind when you go somewhere else. Could NXT sell out the Barclays today, Mike? No. NXT during the time of the Undisputed Era was selling out the Barclays for several years. They were fantastic, and they are NXT legends. But unfortunately, NXT has not sustained any of that. To put them on the top 10 all-time list, like I said, there's other names. We could argue.
Listen, I'm really interested to hear these other names when this list is done.
Well,
because I'm going to be shocked if you could come up with someone. And I'm going to say,
so far you have the Heenan family, but that's a disagreement.
Okay, again,
on who's what.
That's a disagreement between you and me whether they're a true faction or not. So that's the problem there.
So keep in mind, though, so far I've got one that I feel should be there. At the end, these first three I'm not sure about, and yes, I do have two more. I actually have three.
Let's see where we're at. Number 7, we've got the Bullet Club, and that would be the New Japan and Ring of Honor Bullet Club. With, let me see here. We got AJ Styles, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks.
And Prince Devitt, Finn Balor.
And Prince Devitt, yep.
Who started the whole thing.
Finn Balor started the whole thing.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm very happy that you put them on the list. This is a great call by you. The Bullet Club is one of the 10 greatest factions in the history of this business. Getting back to my original point, what did it propel? Did it propel anybody into greater heights? Are you kidding? Do you realize what the Bullet Club did at the time that they did it? They brought back old school cool, by the way, which was fantastic that they had brought back an old school vibe. We're old school guys. I recognized that out of them. They were renegades. They were great. Prince Devitt launched his career into Finn Balor. AJ Styles, I watched transform from TNA Tushy Boy to AJ Styles. And he did it in New Japan. That's when the beard comes in. That's when the badass comes in.
RJ Hudson says didn't care about him. NWO ripoff. Thoughts on that?
Understood. I could see why you would think that, but it's the propelling of the careers that got kicked off through the Bullet Club. The Bullet Club was very influential in this business, all right? Much more so than the Dangerous Alliance or, yes, even the Hart Foundation, because, again, to me, the Hart Foundation's a tag team. It's Brett and Jim. And, the Undisputed Era? No. The Bullet Club actually did a dent in this business, whether you're a fan of them, whether you think they're a retread or not. It launched the careers over to come back to America for not just, look at the names on this. It's ridiculous. Omega, Prince Devitt became Finn Balor. There's so many here. AJ Styles, the Young Bucks. I mean, we love them or hate them, and I can't stand them. But to say that they haven't made an imprint over here, they have. And it all came from the Bullet Club, Listen, I agree with you. Very important.
A faction that carries someone else's career forward too means a lot, right? So and again, remember something. So then, here's my challenge. Then,
okay,
Dangerous Alliance, Stunning Steve Austin.
Nope, was nowhere near becoming the
Rick
Steve
Rude.
Austin. Had to go through ECW to get closer to being the Steve Austin he was going to become. Nope, Rick Rude. No.
All right. Listen,
No, not
we're
at
going to
all.
see where we are.
Rick Rude was a WWE legend. No, I'm not going with that. No.
Number 6, and this kind of pained me because
Yeah.
for me it would be much lower, but I think I put in a fair spot if we're going to be, like you said, historically correct. It would be
Right.
the fabulous Freebirds of the great Michael P.S. Hayes, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and Buddy Jack Roberts, who had one of probably the premier feuds in the history of pro wrestling in WCCW against the Von Erichs. And
Yep.
let's not forget the Freebirds also transferred over to the Mid-South with the Junkyard Dog,
Yep.
Georgia Championship Wrestling,
Yep.
on and on and on. And the Freebirds, iconic Hall of Fame team. Thoughts on the Freebirds?
Oh, I'm surprised you didn't put them higher. I agree with you. My God, the Freebirds are the reason why there are factions today. The Freebirds are the reason why we have music going down to the ring. Correct?
Correct.
I mean, bottom line is that the Freebirds were everything. And you know how highly I thought of Michael Hayes. Obviously. I've said
Absolutely.
it before. Yeah. Okay. What a studly front man. What a David Lee Roth. Because that's what Michael Hayes was, man. Ooh, boy, he oozed rock and roll. He was great. They were great. And if you would put them number 1, I would see why you would. All right. Would I put them number 1? No, but we're not done with this list yet. But I totally get it. Freebirds way up there.
I think if you were to put the Freebirds lower, like myself, it has to do with what they did for the industry. And like you had just said, between music, they made a 3-man team cool.
Right.
They did all they were the spark to a lot that we saw went on later on. So for me, the Freebirds would be lower, but again, at Monte Farrow, we want to be historical. So,
and Mike, real quick, I know we're playing games with words right now, and I'm having my fun doing my jousting with you over the wording of these folks, but I find it interesting. I'm just hammering home why I look at the Heenan family as a faction, because the Von Erichs were a faction, but they were family. They were real family, so nobody looked at them that way.
But they wrestled together. They wrestled together. I do.
My point, though.
Listen, if you would have turned to me and said Andre, Stud, Bundy, Perfect, and Rude, right? Because that was the Heenan family. Haku was not the Heenan family.
Right.
Okay?
And by the way, completely over, not like the Dangerous Alliance, completely over and at the top of the card. I can't ignore that. That to me is the big difference.
If the Heenan family wrestled together, they would be 2, 1, 3. You could put them anywhere. But again, it was a manager with a bunch of wrestlers, and someone said the Heenan family.
And very often you'd see that manager with the whole faction, family, whatever you want to call it, right behind them during the interviews.
When did you see Andre, Stud, Perfect, Rude?
We never had a bunch of them together on promos?
Yeah, you had Bundy and Stud. Right. You had Andre and Andre. When Andre is a bad guy under Heenan, he wrestled.
Bottom line is I guess they're just a stable.
Thank you.
Why don't we could have gone, didn't have to take the long way around.
Well, you know what? That's fine.
Stable, like you said earlier, they're just a stable. I look at them as a faction, but I'm me. But listen, you know what? They're stable. So
I got you. All right, dude, you're going to get angry on this one. This one was very tough for me, but I thought I put it in the right place. The Shield, number 5. Coming in at number 5, The Shield, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose debuted in the WWE as the menacing of justice, tearing through the roster and delivering some of the most brutal coordinated attacks in history.
Yeah.
The Shield also has made the GOAT in WWE. It also has made the best AEW wrestler, and Seth Rollins, Tyler Black is maybe the best wrestler in wrestling now.
Best worker in the biggest company in the world. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
He's the Shawn Michaels in that locker room. I mean, thank God he doesn't act like Shawn Michaels, but he is. I would have put the Freebirds above them, but they deserve to be on this list. Again, it's not just the fact that they were the biggest faction of their time period for the biggest company in the world, and they were fucking great. They were great. It also launched the careers of these 3 guys, and these 3 guys are probably the 3 biggest stars.
Is the Shield your favorite faction of all time?
No.
Wow.
No, I don't think so. Let me see what is still on this.
So I will say this. Okay, I want to tell everybody because I'm gonna give some spoilers. The Wyatts were not on this list. And I'll tell you why I left them off the list.
Okay.
They weren't around long enough. They were together really for a cup of coffee when you think about it. And that was the only reason. Trust me, I loved the Wyatts, but they were around for a cup of coffee. What are your thoughts on that, Jimmy?
Well, it's debatable whether they should be on this list because part of me feels like they should. You have to look at what the Wyatt family launched. What it really launched was the career of Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt is not to be taken lightly. Unfortunately, not to jump on your comment, but he was not only around in life for a cup of coffee, ironically enough, which is really sad. Bray Wyatt did a lot of things in this business and definitely was a superstar. The Wyatt program with the Shield is one of the greatest wars ever. It doesn't matter if it didn't last 25 years. It probably would have come back around to it, but circumstances never allowed that to happen. I could see the Wyatt family being in the top 10, but I could also see them not being in the top 10. The Shield absolutely deserves to be in the top 10. That's all there is to it.
All right, man. Number 4.
Yeah.
The New World Order, the NWO, the group that arguably started the wrestling boom in the late 90s. The NWO was formed by Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and ushered a new era of wrestling. Their black and white colors became iconic, and their reign of terror over WCW for years helped the company dominate the Monday Night Wars. This one's a no-brainer, Jimmy.
Yeah, this is my favorite faction of all time. This changed everything. Without the NWO, there is no Monday Night Wars. There is no. More importantly, you got to ask yourself, well, Jimmy, be consistent. What careers did the NWO launch? I'll tell you what careers the NWO launched. They launched indirectly or are indirectly responsible for the careers of Mankind, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin. These were the answers to counteract what was going on in the NWO, which changed wrestling forever. The idea of Hulk Hogan going bad changed wrestling forever. Okay? The NWO was the most important thing that ever happened in this business because of where we're at today. The direct results of what happened that night that Hogan dropped the leg on Savage. And the whole world melted down because Hogan did such a thing. You do remember all the garbage being thrown at him. It
Absolutely.
was unbelievable how he blurred the lines that night, and everybody wanted to know what's coming next. Okay, what came next was a great Monday Night War. That's what came next. Vince McMahon countered, and the rest is history. So the NWO was irreplaceable as far as their place in history. Hogan had done it again. And I know that makes people sick, but that's the truth. Hogan changed wrestling with WrestleMania. Then he changed wrestling when he turned. Each time that Hulk Hogan showed a different face, he changed the entire business. And that's just a fact. So to me, the NWO is the most important historical faction in the history of this business because it changed everything. And that's that.
At number 3, I put the Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen coming in at number 3, led by Nature Boy Ric Flair, along with talents like Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Ole Anderson, and later on with Lex Luger, Barry Windham, Sid Justice or Sid Vicious, and then obviously Paul Roma at some point. And then the unspeakable Chris Benoit.
Right.
Thoughts on the Four Horsemen ahead of the NWO on my list?
Historically, I wouldn't put them there, but I would put them as the most important faction in the NWA days. I think that this is the greatest faction back in the NWA days, in my opinion. They had everything. They really did.
What was your favorite grouping of the Horsemen?
I liked when Barry was there, but am I just a mark for Barry?
No. You know what? When Luger got there, I got to tell you, when we were watching Georgia Championship Wrestling at that point, the storylines were very good. If you remember, when Ole gets knocked out of the box because he's not showing up to events because he's watching his kid wrestle, and then them tagging Luger, but Luger turns on Wyndham first.
Right.
And then Wyndham, Luger turns good and he's chasing Flair. Now Wyndham's going to help him, but then Wyndham turns on him and becomes a Horseman. I think the ultimate at that point was Wyndham was with Arn, Tully, and Flair.
I agree.
They were at their best at that point.
I couldn't agree more. Barry Windham was just great with whatever he did, and he fit them. And by the way, that music, I never get tired of hearing the Four Horsemen music.
No, never.
By the
But
way,
I will tell you that's so funny. When Sid Vicious joined them, I felt like it was like stuffing a foot into a smaller shoe. It was like, what do you like? He just didn't. Sid Vicious did not look like a horseman, and I love Sid Vicious. It wasn't like I didn't love him, right?
Right.
He just did not fit.
Right. Well, I mean, my favorite faction of all time turned into the Drizzling Shits because eventually I had an NWO shirt on. What's going on here? I don't think. But you guys think I might be a little underweight for this? Oh, don't worry.
By the way,
speaking.
when you sit there and say that they're your number one, it's really hard to argue because you think about you still see people wearing NWO shirts after all these years, man.
Yes. Hey, listen, and you know what's funny? My favorite member of the NWO wasn't even Hogan. It was Razor. It was Scott Hall. Scott Hall was my favorite member of the NWO. I fucking adored him. Everything he used to do. Everything about him was great.
Dude, if you
survey, whatever he was doing.
The black and white vignettes.
Oh, those were fantastic. I fucking love them. Look, the NWO, like, I understand that everybody knows how much I love Hulk Hogan, but I'm glad I was along for that ride because I'm a New York Jet fan. I didn't get to watch the root for the Pittsburgh Steelers all those years. You know what I'm saying? Like,
but think about this, though. Four Horsemen, Tully Blanchard slapping Baby Doll.
Yeah.
And think about this. You know what was so cool about the Horsemen back then?
Yeah.
They were bad guys, but then they would feud with like the Russians.
Right.
And all of a sudden they were feuding with the Russians and Nikita was trying to get it was like I gotta tell you, NWA wrestling at that point was pretty effing
Well, how
good,
about
man.
this too? The Four Horsemen were believable. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
They were believable, and that's what I liked about the Shield. I thought the Shield were believable. Those three guys looked like they'd walk into a club. It's like, oh fuck, I'm out of here. Where's the back door?
All right. At number 2.
Yeah.
DX would be led by Triple H and Shawn Michaels. DX became the most rebellious antics, infamous promos, and in-ring excellence, whether it was the original run with Chyna and Rick Rude and later iterations of the New Age Outlaws and X-Pac.
Yeah. They're great. They're great. They deserve to be on this list, obviously. I don't know about that high, but I could see why you put them that high. They're pretty high on the list, I would think, one way or the other. I love DX. I had the Suck It shirt, didn't you?
Was DX, what was your favorite iteration of DX, though, without Shawn or with Shawn?
You know, it's funny. I actually have heavier memories without Shawn.
Yeah. I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Without Shawn, and I love their presentation. Their music is to die for, let's face it. And it's weird because I normally don't even like talking over music. You know how I feel about that shit. But I like that song. I thought it was great. It fit them to a T. DX was awesome. DX was imperative to the Monday Night Wars. You take DX out of the equation, I'm not sure everything happens just quite the same way.
Gerard brings up a good point about the Horsemen. Remember when Woman joined them? When Woman joined the Horsemen, yeah. I had forgotten all about that. That was a big deal.
Yep, Woman was always really good at whatever she did. By the way, she always came across. She didn't even have to say much. She didn't have to. She was.
Mitch brings up a good point. He's asking about Kevin Sullivan's faction in Florida.
Well,
didn't make my top 10 though, dude. Did not make my top 10.
There's that too. I could see why somebody would.
Well, we're at number 1, Jimmy, and then we're going to see where I missed, and let's see what you think. Okay. But number 1 really needs no reason, and I think it's hard to argue. Anybody cannot argue this. It's the Bloodline. It has become the greatest faction of all time. They've run wrestling and highest pay-per-view grossing, highest views. Maybe the greatest storylines, the love triangle, everything.
There you go, right there. The Bloodline, it was definitely for the last, look, it's not an accident. And for the last 3 years or so, there was this unbelievable storyline. Business-wise, you can't really argue with the success of the Bloodline during this time. Money's at an all-time high, viewership's at an all-time high as far as, it's not just about ratings anymore. It's about how you're selling out, and there's sell out everywhere in the world. The most eyes in the world have witnessed this storyline.
Jimmy,
Do
I
they
got to interrupt you because I need you
Yeah,
to weigh in on this. Mitch
yeah, go ahead.
Seinfeld says Kevin Sullivan's Florida faction over the Freebirds. I
No
personally
way.
disagree.
No way. Not on the impact of the business. Mitch, I understand that you love them, and I can see why they'd be in your top 10. I can see that. But their impact on this business compared to the Freebirds, it's not really debatable. But I understand your love for them, and they should probably be in a top 10. I can see why they would be, but I can't put them in the importance level of the Freebirds.
Back to the
I can't.
bloodline, though. Back to the bloodline.
Yeah, like I said, business wise and storyline wise, they're the tops. Do I think that they're the greatest faction of all time? No, they're not the most important. Everything to me goes back to importance. Okay, so no, they're not. They're not more important to the history of this business than the NWO. I don't think I'd even put them ahead of the Freebirds. But I'm talking about
Wow.
historical impact. It's still tough to judge the historical impact of the bloodline until we're older. We got to look back and see what it is. Now, are they in the top 10? Fuck yeah. Are they in the top five? My personal top five? Probably. I haven't sat here and tried to put these in order as to how I would put them in order. But I'd say they're in the top five. This is
Well,
a
so
great, great faction that has been great for years,
give
not for
me
a couple of
give
weeks.
me where you think I missed on the list.
All right. There is only one that I can really feel very passionate about.
Let me guess, the
And
Heenan family.
no, you ball sack. No, the Adams family. Festa doesn't get enough love.
Good stuff.
Morticia. Unbelievable. All right, there's one faction that I feel deserves to be on this list that isn't, and it's not a mystery. You should know your history. Evolution. Okay, evolution was so important. Think about when evolution came around, okay? You had Stone Cold Steve Austin, as Vince said, taking his ball and going home for the most part. All right. You have to readjust now and build your programming around other things because the wars are over. You've bought the company, you've won. But what is going to sustain you? And what sustained him in the years further, and these things are probably going to annoy some people, but I'm sorry, Triple H was very important and he had to continue his established resume as he was building his own legacy. To be in Evolution, to be with Flair, I love the makeup of this faction because you had Flair, the elder statesman. Who's going to argue with Ric Flair's report card, back of the baseball card? You can't. So you had the elder statesman with the on top of his game Triple H in the prime of his career, dominating the championship, and then you had the most important thing. What did it propel? Oh, I don't know. How about the careers of those two guys, Randy Orton and Batista, who are both first ballot fucking Hall of Famers? This faction was not only crucial at the time that it appeared, but it launched the careers of two of the greats of this past 20 years between those two, as far as the company history goes. You launched Randy Orton's career through Evolution. You launched Batista's career through the thumbs down moment, Mike. The thumbs down moment in Evolution when they got, what was that, on his shoulders and shit, and they're like, thumbs down. I mean, everything about Evolution was great, and I think that Evolution deserves to be in the top 10. That's my call.
So I love that pick, Jimmy, and I'll go back
Yeah,
to what I said about the Wyatts.
right.
Evolution had a lifespan about a year and a couple of months,
Very
and
important, though.
that's absolutely, but that's why I did not put them on the list.
Right,
I always thought about
right,
length of time. The Dangerous Alliance of all the factions that we had on this list
yeah,
probably had the shortest reign, and that was
right.
almost 4 years.
Well,
These other ones, the Wyatt family, it's not even maybe a year and a half. Evolution,
right.
maybe a year. No,
Well,
a year and a half.
I feel like the Dangerous Alliance and the Undisputed Era, in comparison to Evolution and the Wyatt family, I don't think that
You
historically they
you know
match
what,
up.
dude? To be honest with you, if you wanted to argue with me, like the Undisputed Era should not be on this list, I probably wouldn't argue with you at all. I had
Right.
just thought to myself,
No, but
well, they
good
were
pick.
part of a brand
They
that
were.
They influence people.
They did.
But you know what? If you were to say that Evolution should be on there and not them,
Right.
I wouldn't argue.
Yeah,
I
well,
would not argue.
considering the residue that came out of Evolution was, Batista, Batista, and Randy. Oh my God, no!
Yeah.
It's just that, like, the Undisputed Era over Evolution. The Undisputed Era. I mean, the Dangerous Alliance over Evolution. I'm not doing that. But again, they're all good picks. Just like Mitch is, like, yelling about Kevin's faction.
Well,
None of these are bad picks.
who else would you have put in it?
Well, I know, not that I would have put it in, but I noticed that you didn't have the New Day on there. That's definitely a faction. They pulled the Freebirds for how many years?
It is.
It is. So
Honestly, when I was thinking about that, dude, I was like, I didn't even remember them. Like, that's how obsolete they are to me, I guess.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, honestly, I'd rather have the Dangerous Alliance on it than the New Day, but that's me. Maybe because I just hate the New Day. I don't know. Kevin's faction over the New Day.
Dude, I got to be honest with you. I almost thought about putting Demolition in there, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't. It was good enough.
I could not come up with a reason in my head that they should be on this list.
Right.
Even though I would want to. Even though Bill Eadie was just on the show. You know what I mean?
Right. And he was great. Yep. I got you.
Well, that's about it. We're going to go to the next show at 9:00. Take a little beer break, everybody. Want to thank